Do it.
Let's do it.
Hello and welcome to the Rat Nest Podcast, episode number 40 with Chris Fontaine. Hey! What's up, dude?
How's it going, Chris?
Doing fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Beautiful
Doing good,
day.
man.
Beautiful day.
Yeah, it is. It's sunny and 65 here in the desert, so it's actually just delightful. Just a great day.
Here in
Nice.
Redlands, it's 59 and spitting on and off, but it's kind of like that nice Seattle weather, you know?
Yeah, I'm down in Chula Vista, and it's pretty bad, pretty windy outside, but I mean, it's been that way for a couple days, and San Diego is only going to be that way for about a week, and then it'll be 72 for the next 4 months, so you can't really complain too much.
Yeah, dude, I miss that shit. San Diego is like a good city for a lot of reasons, and that's a main reason that you don't realize. Like when you first move into town, you're like, it's fun. There's bars and there's like art and music and like all this stuff, and then you're like, and it's just beautiful, like weather-wise all the time. Icing on the cake. But this is not a weather program.
Yeah.
This has just been checking in with the weather from 3 different California locations.
Yeah.
Dude, so thanks for coming on, man. I was excited to talk to you. We first met the other day at the North Park Book Fair, and we were just kind of sitting there bullshitting, and you were kind enough to come on and talk about what you do and how you create.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And it was super cool. Anytime I can go out and meet somebody and really talk about art and talk about the love for it. And meeting Charles was insanely cool. That dude is beyond talented, and I love illustration and people who do it in the style that he does, or he gets a little bit loose with it, and the way that he just forms his compositions. And coming from my background I do a lot of abstract art and things like that, and so meeting somebody who sort of throws little elements like that into the work too, it just makes me so excited, because I can't put anything like that into my work, and so when I can talk about art in that way, it's just so exciting to me.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna say, did you start off always doing abstract art? What was your progression kind of into the form?
My progression was very insane. I didn't get into it for quite a few years. I'm in my early mid 30s right now, and I could still say that for a couple more years. But I got started in art when I turned 18. I didn't know what I was going to do or wanted to do. I was kind of running with some rough people, some rough crowds, and wanted to kind of drop all that sort of thing. And so I went to the Art Institute down here in San Diego for video game art and design, and kind of threw myself into that for 4 or 5 years. I've done nothing but play games since I was like 6 or 7 years old. And I was like, I want to make games. I want to make games, game art. And then, oh man, about 3 or 4 years into it, I was like, I hate this stuff so much. Like it's interesting. Like when you go into it, there's like this veneer of like, oh, it's video games and it's all this, that, and the other. And then you sort of see like you see how the sausage gets made, and you start to see that like it's not exactly what you think it is, and that the priorities aren't necessarily as pure-hearted as maybe they were in 1990 when Nintendo was making stuff and things like that. And you see the producers have a lot more of a say in certain things, and a lot of the people that I met, when you get into that, you're like, oh, for myself personally, like I love Final Fantasy games and RPGs and that sort of thing, and oh, I want to go work with this company, I want to go work with that company. And then you meet people and they're like, oh yeah, for the first 5 years in the industry, I was working on Hello Kitty Adventure, I was working on Barbie Island, I was working on this game, I would do mobile games, I do this. And it's just kind of like, there's a small percentage of people in the industry that actually kind of sort of get to do kind of what they want. And so I went from there, and after about 5 years of doing that in terms of schooling and everything, I sort of dropped out and didn't really make art for another 6 or 9 months, maybe like a year. And a buddy of mine came over one day and had some cans of spray paint. I was like, dude, you got to get down on this graffiti stuff, and sort of started doing that a little bit, and wasn't really too into it, but I really fell in love with stencils and stencil making. Like I really, really loved that. I had about 3 solid years of doing stencils and just sitting for like 12 hours a day, just killing my back over a drafting board, making stencils. That got me into art pretty heavily from, like the art side of it, not just, video games and everything. It got me into color composition and artists, and sort of set me free. And, was at that time having studios down in Barrio Logan. I picked up a studio at this place called Stronghold. And then from there was working at a La Bodega, and ended up taking some classes at I think it was Grossmont Community College, some painting classes. I wanted to like actually learn how to do some painting techniques and sort of throw that into my work. And we were sitting there one day, and they were passing around, sort of like cheap materials for the class to use, and they passed around a palette knife to mix up paints and things like that. And I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And she's like, "Oh, it's like a palette knife. You like mix your paints," and showed how to do it. And I was like, "Well, can you paint with it?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I took it, and I took some paint and put it on a canvas, and I was just like, "Oh, there's nothing else. There's nothing else in the entire world that I want to do. There's nothing that's ever going to be what this is for me." It was like magic, dude. It was this beautiful moment, and I literally dropped everything else that I was doing because it spoke to me. And like, to be honest, it was something that like from the get-go, it was just like, "Oh, this is beautiful." And and so that's how I really came into doing abstract. And then from there, getting into the studying aspect of it and sort of the academics of it. Abstract art is sort of interesting in the sense of like, you get to study the past, and it's pretty recent, from impressionism of like the like 1880s, 1890s on into like what they were doing in like the 60s and everything like that, and going back and studying it and trying to form and get better and better and better. And I mean, I just love it so much. It's the most beautiful thing in the world to me, and I just love it. But yeah, it was weird to get here. I never thought I would do it. When I was like 21 years old, I was like, "That's the stupidest shit ever." It's just like little marks and things like that. And then like, "Oh, that's like a black canvas selling for $24 million. And what the fuck is that?" And stuff like that. And then kind of understanding it a little bit better now, and how it comes, and how much like history plays a part of it, and just how like abstract artwork was super anti the establishment when it came into being. And now it sort of is the establishment. It's super weird in that respect too. But yeah, it's a pretty long answer, but that's sort of how I came into this.
No, man, totally. I feel like that satisfying moment of like where you put something on a canvas and it kind of just works. Like the feeling is good, and like you see what the possibilities of what it could become is. And I don't know, sometimes it's harder to find that. Like I still make a lot of shitty paintings, right? Like but once in a while there's certain things in a painting that I really enjoyed, or like learned from, or like grew from by working on it, not necessarily the whole piece overall. You know what I'm saying? You were talking about, it's like now that abstract art is the kind of the establishment, it is high art. There's a lot of money that gets put behind these shows, and we see the examples of stuff like at what was it, Art Basel or whatever, with the banana taped to the wall a couple years ago. And do you see at your level like any sort of like that, or are you creating at a level where you kind of flying underneath that radar, or how has that affected it?
I'm definitely flying underneath the radar in that sense of, I don't get into the high art too much. I try to my idol is Gerhard Richter, that dude, and that dude's, they're going to be writing about him 200 years from now. He's going to be the Picasso or whatever of our generation, and just trying to see like what he did and study how he got into abstract and how he makes his paintings. Just Google it. Like, you'll see the things he was doing in the 60s is what people are still trying to get to that mark today. And I mean, like, the best people in the world are still trying to get to his level of abstraction. But like the banana duct tape to the canvas was interesting. That thing really pissed people off. And then, the fact that it pissed people off made people love it. And so it's this weird dichotomy of like the two different sides, and what is art and what isn't art. I was reading a book about sort of like the beginnings of abstraction. There was this dude that had a solo art show, and all of his paintings were blue, just blue, covering an entire canvas. And people were like, what is this? Like, what? This is stupid. This doesn't make any sense. But it was like everything before that was stuff that you've been seeing since the Renaissance, like 400 years of the same paintings, flowers in a vase, women bathing in a bathhouse, people having lunch on a lawn, sailboat, people hunting with their dogs and things like that. And so for them to come in and kind of be like, no, here's what this is now. And then another person came out and made a solo show of all black paintings. And then from there it started going into, oh, well, what else is possible? And, Duchamp, I can never pronounce his name correctly, but the dude who put a urinal inside a gallery is just sort of like, what is art and what isn't art? And So the banana thing kind of takes off on that, but I think the fact too that it was done in 2019, people were kind of like, this stuff's been seen and done before, and but I can't get into that stuff. I do a lot more, just work with colors. I'm trying to get to a point where my colors make sense and they create sort of portals and things like that is sort of the goal of where I'm going right now. When I was maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, one of the things that really set me off, first was getting a palette knife in my hands for the first time. Then I got to see a Mark Rothko painting in person at the San Diego Museum of Art, and big giant, story and a half painting tall, and 10, 12, 14 feet wide, and just orange background with kind of like a light orange cube on top, or a square on top, and then kind of like a darker one on the bottom. And we were going through this, and the person who was curating our tour was like, oh yeah, like he wanted you to come up and be like 6 inches away from it so that it took away your whole periphery and all you saw was his painting. And I was like, yeah, like let's do it. Like let's see what happens when you do that. And so I literally went like that far away from the painting, and I stood there and I was like, all right, like what's gonna happen? And maybe like 10 seconds into it, it's gonna sound weird, but I got transported to like the best way I can describe it is like Cloud City from Star Wars, where it's like all like these oranges and sherbety colors going off into the distance like forever for about 2 seconds. And it was just like I took a step back and I was in front of a painting again, and I was like, what? Like this, what just happened right there? I got to experience this magical moment of sort of like seeing a painting and having it transport me to whatever it was, and my brain making that connection with the painting, and soul and spirit, and that sort of connection coming together for just like, like a quick little moment. And so from there, it was like, how do I do that with my own work? How do I transport somebody into something like that? How do I bring up emotion? How do I bring that connection to somebody through my work without me being there, without explaining it, just having them sort of stand, get the periphery of the painting and just sort of see what they want in it? Or yeah. And so that's sort of like where I'm going with my work right now. And what I'm really, the ultimate goal is trying to do that, soul connection of the person and the piece, and me kind of, guiding them by the hand and taking them as far as I can go, and then letting them and their brain and soul and spirit sort of figure out the rest.
Dude, that's a trip that I'm great answer, because I was literally thinking that when I first pulled up your Instagram, was looking through your stuff, the very first thing that caught me was like, wow, the colors in these are just phenomenal, and it's not just the color combinations that I was noticing, but the slightest bit of color in the right place, a larger group of coloring that are kind of similar, and the way that you're able to use not only the colors themselves, but the amount of color. Because in the abstract stuff, particularly in some of like the real like dotted colors that are all over the entire painting, those, your mind gets to tell you what you're looking at in something like that. And it's fun to see like, well, because this one's a little bit smaller, it looks further away, and kind of that dimension that you were talking about in my head immediately came out like at first when I was looking at it. So I wanted to ask, how much does color take up of the time of going into a painting like that, as opposed to actually like the technique that you have to use? You know what I mean? It seems there's a lot of technique and a lot of, like you're mentioning, guys on horseback hunting with their dogs, and this type of stuff has a lot of special hand technique and things like that, which I'm sure your paintings all do as well. But I'm wondering the balance between color choice and palette and size and all of that coming into the planning, as much as the technique and the technical skill. How's that balance out?
I mean, the color aspect of it is everything. One of the things that is a blessing and a curse, especially when you're working in sort of, I wouldn't say that I go too minimalist. I'm probably a little bit above really minimalist abstract work, but you don't necessarily have all the tools and shapes that other people have in that sense. And so there's so much pre-planning. There's so much understanding. There's so much reading. There's so much looking into different things. I mean, one of the biggest tips that I got from a professor at an art school was not necessarily even looking at what the paintings of the masters from the 60s and 70s. It was more like read their essays, read transcripts of talks that they give where they go through their philosophies of why they're using this color, why they're using that color. Because when they came into it, like everybody was trying to call them on the bullshit. They had to explain everything from the ground up. Like, here's where the fundamentals of art start. Here's my color theory. Here's where this works. Here's where that works. And so the basis of working with color is so huge. And, you know, for myself personally, like I get a lot from looking at people from like the Bauhaus. And so like the Bauhaus in Germany, which is where so much art sprung from. And if you've ever been into an IKEA, like all the furniture in there comes from the Bauhaus. But there was the person that did their color theory class is a guy named Joseph Albers. And he has a book called, it's called On Color, Iterations of Color, something like that. I really gonna look stupid for not remembering the name of this book, but I think it's called On Color. And it basically, like, it's the most insane book I've ever seen in my entire life. It's like 120, 140 pages, and I can only get about 60 pages into it in terms of understanding. But it's basically like colors don't necessarily exist as they are. So like if you have a purple and a yellow and they're by themselves, then they're one color. But the second that you put them close to one another, it becomes a brand new color that you can't necessarily like put into words. And so that gets into this gigantic rabbit hole of if you have 10 colors and they're next to each other and it's next to each other, one color is inside of another color. You know, it's that thing where like if you have like a value 5 gray and it's inside of like a cadmium red box, and then it's inside of a cadmium yellow box, and it's inside of a burnt sienna box, that value gray is going to look different in each one of those boxes and create kind of an optical illusion. Mm-hmm. You can get down the rabbit hole so deep. And so for me, I try to bring that into it with the colors that I'm using, and, you know, setting up from either basic, you know, just using primary colors into using just, you know, 12, 14 different tubes of paint at one time, and then trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Am I going to use black as a background? Am I going to use white as a background? How am I going to put those colors into it, as well as understanding, you know, like if you look at my work, there's a lot of little streaks. I pride myself on trying to be able to get 30, 40 different colors on a swipe of a palette knife that's about 1 inch long. And so understanding the mediums that I'm using and the paints and how much, you know, if I'm using a titanium white on something and I have 8 different colors on it, you know, how am I not going to lose some of the hue and some of the value? Do I want to lose hue? Do I want to bring another color on top of that? You know, do I want to have this sort of muddied color on the bottom, put some bright color on top of that, and then have that intermix into it? And it just gets insane. You can really drive yourself crazy when you're sitting there and, you know, trying to make all these decisions pretty quickly. I work in acrylics, and so I don't have that much time. You know, a lot of these paintings are, you know, especially the bigger ones, I can kind of get away with working a little bit slower and either using retarders or using colors to try to make the dry time extended. But I'm having to just make these decisions so quickly because I'm at literally hundreds of different drying times on canvases when I work larger. And so it's all about pre-planning, reading, like I said, going back, listening to what other artists say, looking at other people and how they work. You know, I can't really pull a lot from other artists in terms of like how they use palette knives and things. I just have my own style of doing it. But listening to acrylic painters talk about like, oh, they do plein air painting, and here's how I get my color, my paints to extend. Here's how I get them to dry this way. And so it's all just studying and reading, and it's fun though. You know what I mean? Like you get to mess around with colors and everything like that, but I would be remiss if I said that it was just like go up to a canvas and just grab paint and sort of fling it on there and have fun and everything. Like that's definitely part of it, and it's definitely fun, but at the same time, it's just like so intense, and I'm playing super fast EDM music to try to keep my heart rate going and my blood pressure up. I'm like, all right, this and this and this, and what do I do with this? You know, because I'm not afforded in probably 75% of my works like time. You know, a lot of abstract artists who don't necessarily work in, I do crazy stuff with palette knives and everything, but like the people who do more like slower works, they'll do like a mark on a canvas and then step back, sit in a chair and just look at their painting for like an hour and just stare at it and study it, and in their brain be like, okay, what if I take like a little bit of yellow and bring it down from here, and how does that mess with the composition over here? And, you know, I'm trying to do a thing of asymmetry where I have this bigger thing over here, and how is that mark going to do this? And so that's how they drive themselves crazy. And so I can't do that. My brain won't let me work that way. And so, you know, the way that I work with colors, it's just a lot more pre-planning, a lot more studying palettes, a lot more buying books. Every book on color that I can get my hands on, I get my hands on color mixing things and guides and everything like that. I just try to just absorb and take in and put it in there because like I said, I don't have enough time because of the way I work, to step back all the time and look at things.
I can't help but notice like a couple of different times when you've been saying, you kind of go into almost like there's like a psychedelic or hallucination feel that you're talking about. One, when you were close up to that painting and like being able to lose yourself in the color. But then two, also you were kind of saying when you put these two colors together, now they're different colors, and having to wrap your mind around that and try and conceive that the color's the same, but it's different now. It's a different version of this same color because it's compared or contrasted. Like that almost puts your mind into a hallucination or a psychedelic state, just having to comprehend that. So it seems like abstract art, like you were saying, was counterculture when it first came out, because it took this mind that was able to perceive in this other way and think about it in a different way that really isn't the norm, or isn't at least the average man being able to think about it in that way.
Absolutely. That's a great point. I love that. And it's there's so much of like a meditation to doing it where like you can't, like for me personally, like I can't think a lot when I'm working. I have to just study and study and study. And then like my test is like an hour long and I have to turn my brain off, and I try to get as meditative as I can be. Same thing with like the fast EDM music and stuff like that. I don't necessarily listen to that in my personal life, but like that'll help me to get to that state of just like, all right, how do I turn off? How do I, relax my jaw? How do I see through my painting when I'm working? How do I not focus on this, and this, but how do I see through it and just sort of like let my mind and my hand take over? The pre-planning and everything like that. Like when I get into it, like all that stuff's taken care of for me. I don't have anxiety. I don't have depression when something goes wrong. I'm able to just like work because you get to go into that trance like state. And luckily my pieces don't take too long, or else I would be going crazy and just big black bags under my eyes and the insanity of living in that world. Oh my goodness, So like I love painting to death and stuff like that, but I love my time off when I get to just like turn off and look at other people's artwork. Like I was talking with Matt, doing the North Park book fair and going around and just enjoying other people's artwork and the ways that they work. It's just so beautiful to me to see how other people do it and how they take, some of the things that I'm doing, I get to see in other people's work and how they're approaching different things. And I love that stuff so much, and looking at a lot of the artists that you all work with and things like that, it's just beautiful to see like there is like that level of like the artists that you're working with, like they're doing those sorts of same things. It's not the same old, that you see with other things. And so it's super cool to see that and connect and talk about it. And it's beautiful, man.
Yeah, dude, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. We've we've been doing it a year and a half now or so since we kind of like got going. We've been doing these little podcasts for the last 8-10 months.
Episode 40. This is the finale of season 2 right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we're actually getting ready to take a few weeks off and like not revamp, but set up the podcast equipment in the new office that we just got, and like kind of solidify where everything will live when we record, instead of invading Jim's kitchen and living room when we do stuff. So yeah, it's been a journey, man, and it's been really fun to curate, kind of like work with all these amazing artists that do their own thing and kind of try to push what they're doing over doing something that's easier or that they think might be more popular. So it's really inspiring.
Dude, and I have learned so much doing this podcast with these artists. Like just like you, I love experiencing other people's art, looking at what they're doing, figuring out, or not figuring out, but seeing and making up a story in my head of why they did it like that or how. And then now we get to do this podcast where it's like, well, okay, explain it to me. See if what's in my brain is actually the way that it works. And I've gotten so much insight being a noob when it comes to art, you know what I mean, that I feel like I get a TED talk almost every single time we get to do a podcast, and it's like I'm learned more about art than people that go to art school, you know what I mean, like techniques and details. It's incredible. I love it.
That's awesome. And podcasting is so awesome for that, for doing just that. Like it's long form conversations. Like I was listening to Joe Rogan like 8 years ago, 9 years ago, or something like that. And one of his big things was like, yeah, if you want to come on my podcast and you have this like astrophysics thing, or you are an archaeologist or something, like I have 3 hours, like break it down for me, like get into the nitty gritty, like go into the things that take a long time to talk about. And like people get excited, man. Like I do shows and vending things and talk to people, and I have my little, oh, here's this, that, and the other, and my little 1 minute elevator pitch and my 5 minute thing, and even getting into like longer forms. But like you get artists together after a show or after like a vending opportunity, and people are just kind of hanging out at the bars and getting a couple drinks in them and just talking about art for 2-3 hours. This is what we talk about. You know, this is what goes down. Like there's nothing, like for me personally, like there's nothing worth talking about in the world than art and creativity. And it's the only thing that interests me. Like I love other things and love hearing about things, you know, and all that sort of stuff. But it gets boring after about 10 minutes because you're not talking about creating art and explaining the soul and the heart and, you know, why we do this and why do you do that? And, you know, there's a great San Diego artist, like TJ Santa Ana. His story, with the first time I heard it, he told me a story for an hour. And I was just dripping and just gushing it, just like he was just feeding me his soul and why he did this and why he did that. And it was just so awesome to hear him just long form it for me in person. And so like meeting him and other people like that, getting together. And like you said, you get to learn, man. Listening to podcasts and hearing people talk about it is the most beautiful thing. And I'm super glad that you guys put things like this on. And I'm excited to see what you're going to do in, you know, season 3 and moving forward. And it's going to be great.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, man. So I wanted to just touch back because we were talking a little bit before we started, and you just moved and then you got sick and you had a few weeks to not make art and you're kind of just down a little bit, but you said that you were able to pick up the palette knife yesterday or today and kind of get that love and feeling back a little bit.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that you said that too. That's that love and feeling. I mean, that's what it is. I went through a couple month period of just, you know, like that whole real life kind of smacks you in the face. My mom got sick. She had a breast cancer scare, and so like that's brutal to go through. And luckily she's doing good. And then having to do some things with her life and take on some other people's baggage and help them sort things out. And then moving, and I had to do some financial stuff for some older people in my life and help them out in that, you know, sort of steer them in the correct direction. You know, it's a trip. Like we all sort of live in this internet world and they don't. And so they don't understand when people try to scam them, which there are a lot of people out there doing stuff like that. And so, yeah, then moving and getting sick, my roommate had COVID. I either just got over COVID or just like the worst case of the flu. And so all these things just hit me at the same time. And I don't have my supplies on. Everything I have has basically been at my buddy's house for 2.5 months and sort of sitting there. And I've only been able to work on Procreate. And if you look at my Instagram, I've got some, you know, fun little digital things that I've been doing, but I mean, like, that's not who I am. And it just started making me miserable. I've been blessed enough to be making art pretty much full time for the last 6-ish years, something like that, 6-7 years, and then not having it for a couple months. It was driving me crazy, and I was walking around miserable. And last night I got to throw my headphones on and just sit down there and went out to Blick's and just bought a couple palette knives and some primary colors and some cheap canvas pads and just go to town. And it was beautiful. Like I forgot how much I love painting and how exciting it is. You know, like for me to have a tablet there, like it's fun and everything, but I don't get to use my shoulder. You know, I don't get to move. I don't get to, you know, like we were talking about earlier, I don't get to be meditative. I don't get to feel the songs that I'm hearing and put that into my work for myself personally. Like I can't do that with digital stuff. I have to be getting my hands dirty and getting dirt under my fingernails and all that sort of stuff. And so, you know, to be able to work last night and just do a couple things and just kind of shake the rust off a little bit and then have fun. And like I was dancing while I was painting a little bit, like moving my shoulders and stuff and just like having fun and feeling it and stuff like that. And like that's what you need, man, because if you're doing art, like I've been doing art, like you talked about, since I was 18, I went into school, and you know, I'll be doing it for that'll be like 13, 14 years ago coming up pretty soon. And so like you can kind of get into a rut, you know, like being an artist is kind of like being in a long-term relationship. You can see the same things over and over and over again and lose enthusiasm about it, or you learn one skill and you sort of have a whatever level of mastery of it and it kind of gets boring. And so you have to go on to something else. And so I wasn't able to touch it for a long time. And so to like see paint move and to manipulate it and to look at these skills, and then also like over that time, you know, like my brain doesn't turn off with art. So I'm looking at things, I'm looking at different people's works, I'm hearing what people talk about. And so to be able to throw that into my work and, you know, using different color palettes, and some of the books that I've bought recently are more orientated towards graphic designers and things like that. And so throwing that into my work, and oh, well, what if I didn't use my color palettes? What if I just use this? And how do I use limited color palettes and Zorn color palettes with just doing, you know, abstract work and stuff like that? Just really got me excited to work again. And so yeah, I can't wait. Hopefully San Diego, unfortunately right now, for some reason, like I just cannot find an art studio. And so hopefully within the next week I'll have one and buy some big ass rolls of canvas and just start doing bigger work and things like that. And I couldn't be happier or more excited to just be out there and working. And, you know, whether I succeed, whether I fail in the pieces I make, I'm kind of like, don't give a shit at this point. I'm just excited to be out there and freaking working and making art. And it's beautiful.
I'm excited to see what comes out, because if there has been a common theme on this podcast, it's when you're the most like down and out or the most removed from it at the time, or, you know, whenever you're not feeling artistic and then you get a chance to dive back in and do it, it's like this spark, the muse comes out, you know, you call the muse and she's there, and you got to take advantage of that when you can.
Absolutely. That thing can come and go, you know, and that's just what it is. You know, people have been going through that since, you know, 8,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, however you want to call it. I mean, like back in the day in Mesopotamia, when people were making clay pots and stuff like that, they had to get sick of it after a couple of years. And, you know, even some like the best artists in the world, like I've had the chance to meet some pretty up there people, and you talk to them about their artwork, and sometimes they're like, yeah, you know, it's cool. This is like, yeah, whatever. And then other times you get to meet people and they're like, I can't believe it. I'm so excited. And I started working with this, you know, a big thing for that. A big tip, if any artist is out there working, one of the biggest pieces of advice I got was just like, put your fingers in as many different pies as you can at like different points in your life. And so like little art pies, like, oh, illustration, oh, sculpture, oh, textile work, getting into 3D, getting into augmented reality, getting into these different things can sort of like bring that spark up again. You know, like how can you take what you were doing before and then put it into a new medium, you know? That's great. I really love tattoos and things like that. And I did an apprenticeship that I failed out of, which is funny, but I got to see a lot of tattooers, and a lot of like the bigger tattooers, like they've been tattooing for like 20 years. It's not magical to them anymore. You know, like they've seen everything. Somebody told me once, they're like, nothing in tattooing scares me anymore, you know? And so to be able to like take that tattooing and that art style, which is very distinctive to tattooing, and putting it into like making ceramics, making sculpture out of it, like doing things that aren't necessarily just like oil paintings and things like that, can really like light that spark up for people again. And I love that stuff too. And, you know, buying a little bit of Sculpey or something like that and sculpting out like a little skull or like a little figurine, like you might not be able to sell it, or it might not be a grand scheme thing that you're doing, but it's definitely going to like make you interested and have your mind and your hands work in ways that it's not used to, you know?
When you were doing, you said you were working on like video games and stuff, like out of college, were you doing the art side of it, like the design and the artistic side, or were you like programming and writing lines and script line and everything like that for those?
No, back in the day, you couldn't pay me to learn code. I hated that shit. Okay. This is also in like 2005, 2006. Like it wasn't like it is now. I'm learning coding now. It's cool. They make it so that like 6-year-olds can learn. But 2005, 2006, when I was getting into it, it was like forums, and there was no Discords. There was no this, that, and the other. It was doing forum things and learning that way. And I didn't want to do anything. I never worked in the video game industry. I just went to school and sort of hung around and screwed around for 5 years. But my big thing was level design, which is like interesting. Like it's sort of like what I do in my work. Like I never wanted to like make the boxes. I never wanted to make the characters. I never wanted to make the guns or weapons. I always wanted to like do like the story driven thing. So like when a person goes into a room, like what objects do they see? How is the light bulb flickering or not? Like how do you build a story around what's going on? Like how do you, hold that person's hand as they're going through this experience, and when you play a video game that's enthralling and you forget where you are and it's this great storytelling aspect, like those are the things that get me excited, and there's like a lot of video games out there that don't really care or focus on that sort of thing. And that's why there's, the industry is a little interesting right now. But, like I played Resident Evil 7 a couple of years ago, and it was just like the level design and storytelling and every beat was just so beautifully done. And things like that get me excited. And so taking that and putting it into what I do now, it's kind of like the same thing. You're taking somebody's hand and having them, have that experience, and you're not pointing things out to them necessarily and grabbing them by their hair and shoving them and saying, look at this, look at this, look at this. You're kind of building that conversation of letting them discover things on their own,
Yeah.
I want to pop in just because you touched on it, but I'm just curious because I learn the most when I kind of ask these questions to people's stuff who I don't do the same thing as. When you're using acrylic, you're using just like heavy body acrylic. You're not mixing any secondary like into that, or is it just paint?
It depends on what I'm doing. You can use I'll use retarders sometimes and in smaller scales, just because I'm more used to the drying times as when I learned. But I mean, soft gel mediums and so like soft gel, semi glosses, things like that. Heavy body things for textures. What's it called? Pumice. Like you can get little glass beads. You can get things to change the actual vehicle that the heavy body's using, so you can make it look more like sand. You can make it look more like gesso. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people, if you really want to differentiate your work or differentiate certain parts of your paintings, adding those different elements into it, or even, that's like kind of the cool part about abstract is you can just like grab random things and throw it in your paint or throw it on a canvas and collage it, and it looks freaking rad. People paint with all sorts of weird stuff and things like that. But I mean, that was a huge thing for me, was like if I have a very like bumpy textury painting, right? So if I'm taking my palette knife and I have like paint that's on my canvas like this, and I take it and I go boop, it's going to make this little like concave paint thing, right? So if I do enough of those and I can get a texture, it makes these hills and valleys going over it. Now, if I was to take a heavy body and just try to spread that on top, it's not necessarily going to work. But if I was to thin it out with like a semi-gloss or something like that and make it a little bit of more of like a liquid acrylic, it's going to really just beautifully go over all of those hills and valleys, and go into a little bit of the valleys, but really stay on top and be a lot more spreadable. And so a lot of this stuff is just getting in there and, like I said before, like reading a bunch of people. Oh my goodness. It's just, this stuff is so expensive when you get into it. Like my paintings cost sort of a lot of money to make, because you're just using so much paint from the tube, and, you're really wanting to build up texture and things. And so the more knowledge you can get about additives and things like that and to work with will just like help you be more a cost benefit. Like the cost of benefit is a lot better than just going out there and spending $60 on materials for one painting and failing, and then, okay, well, I'm going to go to the next one and use $40 and use $20, and it can get weird. And then you don't want to get into the thing too of where you're just like afraid to use paint. You're afraid to use different things because like I think this thing's probably like 20, $30, something like that. And you can run through that stuff so quickly. And so, yeah, man, but using different mediums, you go into Blix or Artists and Craftsmen down here in San Diego, and there's just sections and sections and sections of weird things. And like I said, little glass beads and fun little things like that you can just put in, and little shimmers and things to put glitter and all sorts of fun things into your works.
That's cool. I love getting the 101 courses like that. Even though I don't paint with acrylic, it's cool to hear like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's fun, man. And like acrylic, that's the cool thing about it is it's very versatile. Like I can't touch oil paints. I can't. Me and oil paints like do not mix. I do not have the patience for it. I can't sit there and use varnish and thin things out and have the, oh my goodness, mineral spirits and freaking. I was talking to a guy in a painting class once, and he was talking about like how he only uses lead white because lead white, this, that, and the other. And I was just like, my brain turns off like when it gets to that. Like the cool thing about acrylics is you can just kind of cobble things together and then just like use it, and the results that you get are instantaneous, and you can't mess with it. Like once that thing's on there and it dries like a little bit, ain't no going back and touching it. Like
Yeah.
you can't fix mistakes, you can't do any of that sort of stuff. And so you get to have these fun, like you get to play, and that's like the best part of art for me is like, there's that great quote from Picasso where he's like, oh, it took me 3 years to learn how to draw like Michelangelo, but a lifetime to learn how to draw like a child, because you get to play and you get to experiment and do these fun little things and kind of whip paint around. And you know sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but the more studying, the more you go and look back at the master's works and what they did and reading about people and sort of like getting ready before you go into it, the more the more consistency that you get. Like consistency is huge with that sort of thing, and being able to play and then also be consistent in your works is huge and a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. Hey man, so we're getting close to the hour mark here, I think, which is normally about where we finish up. So is there anything you would like to promote besides the Instagram? Do you have any shows, or are you hanging anywhere in San Diego? People can come check it out.
Yeah, I do vending things all around San Diego. If you go to Little Things, follow my Instagram, and I try to put that stuff out there, and I try to what do you call it? I try to promote other people's shows and things like that they're doing. And then I work with Connect San Diego. They're fantastic. Everybody listening to this should look them up. They have 2 storefront locations, one in North Park, one in Ocean Beach. I show in their Ocean Beach location, and they're an incredible little like art collective and all sorts of artists, and they do shows and DJ events and stuff like that, and then have like this really cool group of artists that show work out of there and that sort of thing. And so yeah, Connect San Diego, and then follow my Instagram. And we have a couple minutes. I would love to hear do you guys have any thoughts on NFTs?
Yeah, dude. I mean, I don't know where I stand. I stand on the side that doesn't have any and probably won't do any right now. But like, I don't know, things could change. Maybe someone could convince me to do something, but I don't. It's not what I really like enjoy doing even. You know what I mean? Like it's so digital, it's so unphysical to me. Just like I don't even really like to Photoshop anymore. Like I have to for certain projects, and like to sit in front of the computer and work on like laying out books and just color correction and like dumb little shit, but it's not fun anymore. Like I really just like painting when it comes down to what I was going to make to sell, if that makes sense. Not to make a living or whatever. Like I could do anything. I'm not painting for a living currently. But when it comes to like making art for shows and stuff, like I think I would just stick to what I'm doing and trying to get better at that.
Personally, I think NFTs are like the smallest use of the blockchain that we're seeing. Like it's the beginning of something huge. Like the back end of the way that blockchain works that's what's going to really change the world. I don't think like the baseball card aspect of NFTs of an image being sold for millions of dollars by this guy. Like I think that's kind of a phase, but I think you're going to see the implementation of the way the blockchain is used and the identification of digital mediums and different technological designs are going to be able to have this blockchain that it's essentially going to come down to where there's going to be a lot more like corporate legislation and things like this, where because now the artist or this corporation decided or this group decided that they bought this or own this or created this, and they have the blockchain to back it up. And so now I feel like it's going to put handcuffs on a lot of like creativity when it going forward. because if you create something close enough to somebody else's thing, they're going to be really pissed, and you're going to have to go through this whole court battle to show I have a blockchain that shows a different time and a different stamp from what they're doing and all of that. You know what I mean? As far as the art world, I see it putting kind of some handcuffs on it. But as far as the back end of what the blockchain actually is and accomplishes, that's going to change the world.
I like that. I like both those answers. I'm on the side of both of you on that. Like with Matt, I'm the same way, where it's like, yeah, like I just kind of want to make art and that side of it. And then Jim, what you said too about like the back end, I try to watch videos on what is a blockchain and seeds and all that sort of stuff. And I can't get more than 5 minutes in before I'm just like,
it's mind numbing.
Like, let's go hang out. Like, let's not do this.
Yeah, I probably only understand about 15% of it, but like on the crust, on the surface of what I understand, you know what, honestly, I think that's probably why I believe it's going to be so big, because it's something so large and unfathomable that there's got to be a better application for it than just a digital baseball card. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the PFPs and things like that, and that's a whole interesting realm. And I'm on the complete fence. I could go either way depending on what day it is. But some, like what you're saying, like there's a lot of cool stuff with that, and back ending things and property ownership of certain things on different levels, and it can go in some different routes. And then on the other side of it, there's some what I'll say interesting aspects to it as well, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, cool. Thank you so much. I love asking people that question because I have no idea, and I'm on the fence. And so getting different people's understandings of what it is and what it isn't and their views on it, I love, because I was talking with somebody the other day, and it's like, it's gonna happen, and it's gonna get bigger and bigger, and it's already getting bigger and bigger. And yeah, it's not going away. From my understanding is that it's not going anywhere. And with Web 3.0 and that sort of thing coming out, and if you ask me what Web 3.0 is, I couldn't tell you, but I know it's coming, and so
We've got a really good episode with our friend Sully a few episodes back, and he touches on NFTs. He's actually created a handful and is a part of a group that is working with them and creating blockchains and doing all of that stuff. So he goes into it slightly in the episode. He doesn't probably get as deep as everybody wants him to. But I think still NFTs are one of those things that there's like one out of every 1,000 people actually completely gets it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And everyone else has a little piece of it and understands it how they do. But yeah, the episode's great though, just to kind of get a view of what goes into creating them and that sort of thing.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, please do.
Well, thanks again, Chris, dude. It's really nice talking to you. Really fun to get to meet you at the book fair and then this workout. And I'm glad to hear you're doing better. And
thank you.
Painting a little bit more now that you're getting back on your feet.
Absolutely, man. Thank
awesome.
you so much.
Thank you both for having me so much. This was so cool. Anytime I get to talk with people about art and stuff like that, it makes my eyes light up and makes my soul happy and all that sort of stuff. It's rad. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
No, it was a great interview, man. Thanks for all of your insight. And I know there's some acrylic painters out there that are enjoying this episode.
Also, I hope they got something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, man. It was great interview. Thanks again for making time for us.
Thank you so much. Take it easy, guys.
Later.
Matt, you want to take us out?
Sure. This has been another episode of the Rat Nest Podcast. You can catch us every week except for the next 3 weeks, because we're taking them off. So catch us first week of February. We'll be back with new episodes in a new studio with new shirts on.
Yeah, I'm going to buy a new hat too.
Yeah, all right. That's all I got.
Bye, Moose.
Bye, Moose. Later, Dad.
Later, homie. Good episode.
Yeah, that ruled.
Yeah.